All right, John, let's start, if we can. Tell me about your first interest in going into education.
Oh goodness. I resisted, coming out of high school, I resisted going into education. My mom was a school bus driver and a high school secretary, which she worked over 20 years in both those capacities. So when I went to college, I was, like a lot of students, looking at pre-vet, business. I actually have a 2-year business degree.
Okay.
But in the end, I had a coach who influenced me a great deal, and I gave in to the resistance of becoming a teacher, primarily because I wanted to work with young people, and I had that desire to coach and work with kids. And so over time, I learned in my first couple of years of college that's what I wanted to do. That's where my passion was, my purpose in life. And, since that point in time, that's what I've been doing. My first job, well, I actually had a job offer in Old Rich, South Dakota, which is south of Hot Springs. Little school, not much. So my first year after graduation, that's what was my job. I turned it down because at the time I could make as much driving to beet truck harvest and going back to school and my summer work that I always did. So I could make as close to as much doing that while continuing on to get some additional education. So my first real teaching job was in Iroquois, South Dakota.
And what was your job there? In a small district, it's probably a lot of things.
It was, yeah. My job there was elementary physical education. I taught business math, as well as I taught a skills for adolescents course while I was there. So over my years in the teaching world, I taught Phi-Ed, I taught business, I taught 7th grade math, I taught...
Oh, that's brave.
Yeah, the nice part at the 7th grade age, it was so fun to see when the light bulb went off, because they share everything.
Right.
And so you'd see some of those kids who struggle and struggle and struggle, and eventually when that light bulb went off, it was so satisfying. So that was the exciting part. Yes, I love the middle school age, always have, but they can drive some people totally crazy because at that age, they're all like a light switch. Their mood switches as fast as a light switch.
Doesn't it though? Doesn't it though? We raised kids, so we know that, right?
Yep.
What would you say your teaching style was like?
Overall, I felt I was caring, compassionate with kids. I worked really hard to help them understand whatever subject I was teaching. Yet, I come from a very conservative background, so it was, here's the rules, we're following the rules. And, I still have kids that I taught or coached way back then who still send me notes or emails or Facebook, or I've got one for the last, 40 years, sends me a birthday card. So
That's cool.
that's the satisfaction of knowing you made connections to kids. And I still have those who are in their, 40s. It's Coach, Mr. Landgaard, Sir, and I go, no, you can call me John. You were past that stuff, but you just know they really appreciated the connection you had in their life.
So you were Mr. Landgaard and you were Coach Landgaard. Talk about coaching a little bit.
Yeah, so when I started out, I was the head boys basketball coach. I was the assistant girls basketball coach and the junior high girls coach.
All at once?
Well, when I started teaching in South Dakota,
Yeah.
the girls' basketball was in the
In the
fall,
fall,
boys
yeah.
was in the winter. That eventually switched after I got out of it. So you had to do one or the other, really. Excuse me. But that's where coaching helps to make those connections. And of course, in a small district, most kids participate at some level of some extracurricular. So I started with a bunch of colleagues who were my age, and we were all tied at the hip to some level. We were all very consistent in what we did and how we treated and taught kids. So that was a really added bonus in my first experience in teaching. So it was a fun time, it was an exciting time. And coaching overall, I had success to those teams we actually struggled with. I can actually say my first year teaching, my boys basketball team was 14-4. We lost in the region tournament. Maybe should have been in the state tournament, but those are the woulda, shoulda, coulda stuff. And then with the girls that I actually started out in junior high, eventually when they were seniors, and the boys I used to coach on the side in 5th grade, those kids all did make it to the state tournament. They played in the state tournament, and not that I played the major role, but I think that base that they started with helped them understand what it took to get there.
When you think about your career in teaching and in the classroom and things like that, how does that prepare you to, and maybe you can talk a little bit too about your road to an administration path?
Yeah, so my road to administration may have been a little different because I got married after my 4th year of teaching, and I was older, so I was older than the average person who probably gets married. I was 29, but what happened is my wife ended up with a job at Citibank, and as I've said to many people, I was going to enter the construction world, and which I did for that summer, but ended up with a teaching job in Del Rapids.
Okay.
What happened was I had time which allowed me to go back and get my master's degree at SDSU. And at that point started moving towards administration. I kind of always had in the background that 10 years of being in education, I wanted to be an administrator and make maybe a little different contribution to kids' education.
Right.
So I went back to school for 2 years while I taught in Del Rapids, and my wife worked at Citibank. After I graduated, that's when I got my first high school principal athletic director job.
Okay. And where was that?
In Marion, South Dakota.
Marion, yeah.
Yeah,
That's right.
so in the same area. So my wife, I always say at that time, she made all the money, and I got to be in education for fun.
Right.
I wasn't dependent on the job, so to speak. I could do something different if I needed to. So it allowed me to be more aggressive in trying to promote education in the Marion district. And that's where actually during that time we managed the budget, but we also did a construction project back then. Now, back then it was a music room, high school room, doing some remodeling
Right.
for $1.6 million.
Kind of seems like peanuts now, huh?
Yeah, it's peanuts now. The economy has changed, costs and everything has changed at that point. But, you know, Marion was a great community. It was a great place to start. I started out as high school principal AD, and the board asked me to go back to get my superintendent's license, so that's when I went to USD to get my specialist. And for 1 year, I served as the superintendent elementary principal.
Oh my goodness.
So I've
Dual
covered
roles.
a wide range of jobs.
Right.
You know, I even drove school bus when I was in college, so I have that to my resume. I gave my bus license up after I started teaching. And that because I knew that's not what I wanted to do.
Right. That's not many superintendents, I guess, have went that deep into the education system where they were a bus driver too. So you've been exposed to almost every part of the education process.
Well, pretty much, because I used to, at times on the side, do some of the custodial stuff. So again, I believe I've kind of experienced the whole gamut of education at some point in time, and it isn't. So basically, when I came to Minnesota 30 years ago, my wife wanted to stay home with the kids, wanted to quit her job, and that's where we moved to Stephen, Argyle 30 years ago. And I was the superintendent there, entered into the world of 2 districts. So I was superintendent for 2 districts that was looking to consolidate, which was a whole emotional item.
That had to have been rough.
Yeah, it was, that first year.
Nobody wants to give it up,
No,
do they?
I had somewhere in the neighborhood of 45 school board meetings, trying to deal with getting everything set up to hold an election.
Right.
And then number 2, to try and do some of the planning. So yeah, you had to develop some thick skin right away, because as anybody knows, consolidation votes are emotionally charged. Nobody wants to give up their school.
Right.
So it was an interesting time. Love the community still to this day. A lot of wonderful people, and it was a great experience coming to Minnesota. I had a couple neighboring superintendents that I would say were not only good friends, but great mentors. And part of why I believe I understand Minnesota finance, which very few people do.
That's good. Good preparation.
Yeah.
So then let's talk about, let's talk about when you got to Worthington, what year you came here.
I came in 2003, so July 1 of 2003, 22 years ago. Been a long time. I don't think that was the overall plan in the back of my head, but Worthington is a great community. It was a different time 20 plus years ago.
It certainly was.
You know, you can talk about the finance side, and you know, the general fund budget was $24 million roughly, and the fund balance was $2.6 million. Well, today we're in a position of, you know, our general fund balance is $60 million, our expenditures, and our fund balance is, you know, 35 plus million at this time. So during that time, we've managed to, with the support and trust of the school board, we've managed to financially create a very stable school district, but that also comes with doing some things that are challenging, such as budget cuts or construction or those type of things. Back when I started, the diversity and the overall diversity in the school district was 34%. Now we're at 75%, so there's been this huge transition of what our school demographically looks like and how we need to provide great education for every kid.
Right. Yeah, that's not something that you see. I mean, certainly Worthington is an anomaly in that, because it's, you know, we're outstate and we have challenges that Minneapolis districts have as far as diversity.
Yeah, it depends on the school or school building you're in, how other districts. But if you just rate the overall, we're number 2 on the list on a per capita base with diverse students in our system. Um, I say it's a global school because we have a number of cultures represented in our school system, which my oldest daughter will tell you was a huge benefit, probably one of the biggest when she went off to college.
Right.
She had the ability to work with everybody, where not everybody has that ability.
That is very true. I found that with my children too. That probably was a challenge at times. We've had the spotlight on us in certain respects for that particular thing. What are some of the other challenges that you faced?
Well, I think overall when you're dealing with, when I first started, you know, we had to look really hard at the budget
Right.
to start to change things. And the last budget cut in this district was 2007. And since that point in time, we've seen growth, we've seen more students, we've seen an exciting time for the community and the district. So the challenge was, how do we provide the education for all the students we were? It's no secret that our buildings were overcrowded for a number of years. We tried to get ahead of it with a proposed construction project in, well, I should back up. In 2010, we
Right.
added on to the middle school, and then we tried to get ahead of it in 2013 with a new building. Of course, the community didn't support that, and then after that point, there was regular referendums, primarily to try and address our space needs, because there was overcrowding. And once we got the building, one of the things I heard, people did not realize how it changed the functionality of the kids and the staff, and how much of a better environment it was when you weren't on top of each other.
Right.
And we weren't using storage rooms that were created in the small learning spaces. So overall, just that whole culture environment changed because of having more space. So one of the things most people don't know, since 2010, we've done roughly $130 million of major projects, from buildings to parking lots to athletic fields to, you know, you can drive around the community and see it. You can also come in our buildings and see some of those changes. The nice part is taxpayers only have debt of $58 million. Because of the board and their decisions, they were able to pay for a number of these projects with dollars that they financially managed. And that's the bonus of it. Like I said, I had a board who was very futuristic, understood what it took to get these goals accomplished, and trusted that in my work, they were trusting in what I was doing was the correct thing. And we were able to move those forward.
Right. And those are tough sells, aren't they? To the community.
Again, yeah, to maybe go back to your original question, what were some of the tough things?
Right.
And that's one. Two, not always are the employees 100% on board with some of the things that are being promoted. So you run into that element. The community, of course, everybody has gone through the system, so they understand, and sometimes some think they're an expert. But in reality, there's so much to understand in the education system. And if you are truly not engaged, you only see the top of the umbrella. You don't see everything that's under the umbrella. And that's where I think, quite honestly, people's frustrations in the community, all of a sudden something comes up that they don't agree with it, and they don't understand all the work that's gone on in justifying what's being promoted, to make the system better and keep it at a high level.
In your job, you're not an elected official, but you have a lot of bosses, a lot of constituents, if you will. What's that like?
Well, it's interesting because, again, some people understand and are willing to trust what you're doing is the right thing. And then you have those who are totally opposed or don't like what is being promoted. And when you get to a emotionally charged issue, that really comes out. And typically, if it's emotionally charged, people develop their thoughts right out of the gate and don't want to hear anything else.
Yeah, it's kind of, they're kind of deaf to anything after that.
And they don't, I think that's a societal thing. If you look at where our country or even the world is right now, people have made up their minds on a lot of things. There are those, what most people will say, the 20% in the middle, who are willing to listen and change their thoughts because they want to know more.
Right.
There's the 40 that always support you, and there's the 40 who, no matter what you say or
Never
do,
will.
are because they become closed-minded to what is truly the need versus the wants.
So, given that, and having said all that, how does John, the person, how do you handle all that?
I've been able to one, I'm pretty thick-skinned. I don't pay attention because I know there's a lot of emotion to what some people say. They probably truly don't mean it, and they're just very frustrated, and oftentimes don't want to come and ask questions. So I handle it pretty well on that level, and it's a lot like coaching. Not everybody agrees how you coach, and they're not at practice every day to see what a coach sees.
Right.
And they don't see the effort people put in or kids put in practice, much the same as they don't see the effort that happens daily on a lot of people's plates to make sure kids get a good education. So again, I've always said, when I go to bed, I ask myself a question: did I do what's right for kids today? And I sleep very well because of that. Now, are there those issues that cause you some restless nights? Absolutely. But the whole idea of people taking shots at you because of the position, that hasn't bothered me. Because I know I'm doing what's right and the best for the kids, the staff, the community.
So as you look ahead and a little bit, let's look back a little bit more. Let's talk about, what are you most proud of here?
Most people would probably think it's all the facilities. That's just a piece of it. That's what I call the architecture of supporting an education. The pieces that I really, probably most recently, but it's 10 years old actually, is the Grow Your Own. We developed this Grow Your Own. It was an idea where I kept throwing, I'll back up just a little bit. I noticed early on the number of kids that graduated from Worthington that went into education was at a higher percentage than I've seen in a lot of schools. And I'm going, why can't we tap into this and help them be a part of our system?
Right.
And so, jeepers, a dozen years ago, I keep saying I threw mud at the wall in Jeff Williamson's office about, we need to do this. This is my idea. This is how we put it together. This is what we need to do. And part of it was to eliminate some of the barriers of kids because of their culture who couldn't go to an education college and leave their family. It was a
Right.
So we developed that first Grow Your Own program, and it's still functioning today where kids could get some education courses in high school. They could go to Minnesota West, get their 2-year degree, and SMSU, they wouldn't have to leave the community because they could get the other 2 years, for the most part, right here in Worthington.
Right.
Since that point in time, we've been a part of some other Grow Your Own programs. I do think the benefit is to address what I call the teacher shortage that's out there. We'll see benefit of that in 2 to 3 years. And our pools will be larger. We'll be able to fill jobs that we've struggled to fill the last 5 years. We actually just hired for a position that we've been advertising for 4 years, haven't been able to get somebody. So really exciting on that. They aren't a part of the Grow Your Own, but I think it's what's changing to allow us to hire high quality people. And so the Grow Your Own program or the Teacher Pathway Project is probably got to be up there as the #1 type item that I'm most satisfied with during my time.
You talked about the teacher shortage. That's, I'm sure, been a recent, maybe it's been ongoing and it just more come to light now. That's been a challenge for everyone. What do you see in the future being a challenge of a school district?
Well, I think depending on, there's so many unknowns right now in our country, the community, what's there. The future will all depend on if you want to be aggressive to address, finding high quality teachers, having facilities that support educating kids. It's having things in your community that people want and desire. And the most common one that right now is in the community is an ice arena.
Right.
Or venue. The current one's been around for a really long time. It's served its purpose, but it's probably time, because I know from conversations there are individuals who have left the community because of the facility. They wanted their children to have better opportunity, and that's across the board in certain things.
Right.
I believe right now when you talk community-wide, Worthington is positioned very well to see increased housing, increased business development, which I'm talking new business, not business expansion, which will lead to further business expansion by others, and in turn will create a strong or increasing enrollment in the school system. And school systems drive your community and your community growth. So it's important to have good facilities. It's important to provide a quality education to those kids that are in your school systems. And it's just overall the hub. We create a lot of activities that people can participate in. And so I see in the future this school district and community having a great opportunity in front of them, but it's going to take some work.
So that work, your work here is drawing to a close, and that work will be left to your successor. Let's talk about what you're going to do when you're done in June, I believe, right?
Yeah, I'm done the end of June. Yeah, and what I'm going to do, I haven't totally figured that out. I know for at least a time period, I'm going to do some hunting, I'm going to do some fishing. I'll probably spend the first month a lot of time in the boat, because I've missed out on some of that just due to my job. So those are probably two priorities. My wife keeps trying to get me to find a job, which I probably will.
Right.
And it's definitely won't be full-time.
Right.
She thinks I should ride a lawnmower so I can just
Oh, okay. Be out.
quietly be by myself and back and forth and do what I need to do. I've thought a little bit about doing some interim work, whether in the current capacity or
Sure.
even in some other consulting role or capacity. We'll see where that leads, but I still believe I have a purpose that can provide a benefit to education systems. Of course.
Of course. Okay, so let's talk about, okay, personally, you've got grandkids. Are you going to spend some time, what are you going to do, spend some time doing fun besides the boat?
Yeah, so I've got a lot of work around the home we've purchased, so there's some of those things I'm gonna need to do. So that'll keep me busy, and of course, we have 3 grandkids. If my daughter had her way, I'd become full-time daycare. Not gonna
You're
happen.
not going there.
No, we're not doing that. I'm a sub when they're desperate.
There we go. There
So,
we go.
but I have, the fun stuff I want to do. There's some what I'll call short traveling trips that we want to do. After our last plane experience, it probably won't be flying.
Did you have a bad one?
Oh my goodness. And we're not the only ones that experienced it. So,
Oh.
yeah, so we have no desire to go flying.
You'll be taking Route 66, huh?
It'll be 4 wheels on the ground and away we go. But yeah, it's, I'm just looking to kind of relax, sit back and, do some things I haven't been able to do because of the job. And because of how I was raised, of commitment to the work you do, which I wish more people would understand.
We're kind of in the generation of you earn your rest.
Well, you do,
Yep.
and I was raised, you don't get paid for everything you do. You work until you get the job or the task completed, and I was also raised where you didn't get a pat on the back because you did your job. You had to do something extraordinary to get that, and hence, I haven't always been very good at patting people on the back for doing a great job. I try, but it's a flaw I have. And it's just one of those things. I was raised in a very, what I'll call conservative Scandinavian household who, you earned what you got. And so that has entered into what I call that whole belief leadership. I just heard a speaker last week regarding your belief leadership and your value leadership. And even though you have, that's what guides you doing what you believe is the right things to serve. And again, that also comes to the whole country, in my view, of respect. People have lost the respect for positions, and I don't care who the president is, you still have to respect the position. I don't care, you're minister in your local church. You may not like them, but you need to respect the position, and that's how I was raised. You respected your elders. And so that may shed a little light on who I really am. Not everybody understands that, and I think our country needs to get back to some of those foundational values that exist.
When you talked about kind of maybe workaholic, maybe isn't the right word, but really carrying your job throughout your life, what will you miss about it, and how will you handle that?
You know, yeah, I don't care what anybody says. When you're in an administrative role, it's a 24/7. There's many vacations I've been on where I'm taking multiple phone calls or having to check emails. Even when I'm hunting, I've been out in the middle of some field in South Dakota looking at and responding to an email. That's just part of the job. I will not miss that, being on call 24/7.
Yeah.
Won't miss the weather calls, because in most people's eyes, you're never right. You know, it's just one of those things. I always chuckle. The weather's, I always said calling the weather was always the worst part of the job.
Really? That's interesting.
Just because people don't understand. You spend a lot of time, you do a lot of worrying, you do a lot of praying that you made the right decision.
Sure.
And partly because you want everybody safe. And stuff sometimes happen. I'd probably say over my entire career, I've made 3 to 4 bad calls on weather. Some people would say I made a lot more.
Well, that's pretty good odds given all the weather we have here.
Yeah, and those weren't even necessarily here, you know. So that, I will not miss that part of the job. I think I will miss, even though in my role I don't interact with kids as much, I'll still miss that interaction with kids. At one point in time, I thought about going back to be a principal just so I could be closer to that interaction. I'm going to miss people, and I'm not going to miss people, if that really makes sense.
Makes perfect sense.
I'm not going to necessarily miss all the employee stuff.
Because
Because
whatever job you have, the people are really the greatest and the hardest thing to deal with.
And they can. And I end up with all the crud on my desk of the tough things with people. So, yeah, those are things that I'm not necessarily going to miss. That's why my wife thinks I should get a mowing job.
That would be a real departure from what you do now.
Yeah,
so, yep.
exactly.
Well, is there anything else that we missed? Anything else that you'd like to talk about or say?
I don't think so, Kelly. I think overall what I do want to convey, I have really enjoyed my time in Worthington. I think people need to really understand this is a great community and it has so much to offer. And the school system is outstanding. That's partly why I actually turned the head to Hunter down 6 times before I came down and looked at the school and put an application in, because we saw how wonderful the school system was at that time. And I think it's still at that level or higher. I would encourage people to see the positives of the school, the community, the region. Because there's so much to offer. When we moved here, the city motto was, "You'll come to love us." And I think that was very true. I'm not sure why they moved away from it, other than maybe they thought it needed to be upgraded. But this community, I've been in a lot of communities. This community has so much to offer. It's in a great position. It's a wonderful community and school system. And people need to start talking that way, in my view.
Well, on behalf of the community, the school system and the staff, thank you for all you've done for all of us, and good luck to you in that fishing boat.
There we go.
Thank you, John.
Yeah.